I have big news. It's official. This is a murder investigation. This is a suspected murder. Lynette Hooker is no longer missing in, a criminal investigation. This is a suspected murder investigation. My sources have confirmed this for me.
7 weeks ago, Brian Hooker sat down with 3 major American television networks and told the world his wife bounced off the back of a small dinghy. He said it was a tragic accident, a cascade of failures. He said he never would have harmed Lynette. He said he was staying in the Bahamas until she was found, that it would take a higher authority to move him. He was on a plane within 24 hours. 7 weeks later, the investigation has a new name, suspected murder. Ashley Banfield's sources confirmed it directly. The Lynette Hooker case is no longer classified as a missing persons investigation or a routine criminal inquiry. It is now officially a suspected murder investigation. That classification carries legal and jurisdictional weight that changes everything about what investigators can do and where this case is heading. Here is what that classification means practically. It means investigators have accumulated enough evidence from the GPS data, from the digital forensics on the Soulmate, from the witness accounts, from the contradictions in Brian Hooker's story, to formally conclude that Lynette Hooker did not die accidentally, that she was killed, and that the person responsible is known to them. Brian Hooker has not been charged. He denies all wrongdoing through his attorneys. He is presumed innocent until proven guilty in a court of law. But the investigation now has a name for what happened to Lynette, and that name is murder. On the morning of June 3, 2026, the Coast Guard cutter Margaret Norvel arrived in the Abacos. This is not a small vessel. The Margaret Norvel is 154 feet long. It carries a crew of 24. It can travel at 35 knots. It is a fast response cutter, built not for comfort but for military-style operations on the water. On board were dive teams, an ROV, a remotely operated underwater vehicle capable of searching the seafloor at depth. K9 Maggie, the cadaver dog from Broward County Sheriff's Office who has worked this case before and who can detect decomposition scent from 30 feet underwater. And members of the Coast Guard Investigative Service, CGS, the federal agency that has been working this case 7 days a week for over 7 weeks. Here is what tells you everything about the urgency of this operation. The Margaret Norvel did not anchor when it arrived. It did not wait for the crew to check into accommodations. It did not take a settling in day after the journey from Florida. Within 1 hour of arriving, the rigid inflatable boat was in the water. Teams were deployed. Search operations had begun. They traveled to the Bahamas and went straight to work. Multiple locations are being searched simultaneously. The dive team spent most of the first day off the eastern shore of Marsh Harbor. The ROV went underwater at a specific location called Witch Point, an area south of where Brian claims he washed up. An abandoned man-made harbor. Dark water, close to where the Hopetown Volunteer Fire and Rescue retrieved Brian's dinghy. Maggie worked the northwest side of Lubber's Quarters. Beaches and shorelines that were never searched based on Brian's story because his story pointed investigators in a completely different direction. That is the significance of what happened today. For 7 weeks, the search was based on what Brian Hooker told investigators. Now it is based on what his GPS data actually shows. And the GPS data points somewhere else entirely. There is a detail from today's operation that has not received the attention it deserves. An article of clothing has been found. Someone in the Abacos, connected to the network of locals and supporters who have been helping this investigation, found an article of clothing that matches the description of what Lynette Hooker was wearing on the night she disappeared. The aqua-colored bathing suit cover-up. The one Brian Hooker never mentioned to fire and rescue teams. The one he omitted when he gave searchers a description of a woman in a black two-piece bathing suit. The one that was visible in the photograph taken of Lynette at the Abaco Inn at 6:34 p.m. on April 4th. That article of clothing was turned over to the Coast Guard, with coordinates of exactly where it was found. This is significant for 2 reasons. First, it suggests Lynette's remains or belongings may be closer to a specific location than previously known. A piece of her clothing does not travel to a random spot. It ends up somewhere for a reason. Second, it directly contradicts Brian Hooker's account of what his wife was wearing. He told the people searching for her she had on a black bathing suit. Nothing else. And yet the clothing that has been found matches exactly what she was actually wearing. The clothing he chose not to tell anyone about. Investigators have the clothing. They have the coordinates. And the Coast Guard is now operating in that area. Brian Hooker has a new attorney. Not the Michigan-based lawyer he hired when he first returned to the United States. A different one. And the choice of this attorney tells its own story. The new lawyer is a former Department of Justice attorney, DOJ, federal experience, federal litigation background, federal prosecution knowledge. Brian Hooker spent weeks with a state-level defense attorney. Now he has hired someone who knows how the federal government builds cases, someone who understands how CGS operates, someone who understands what a federal indictment looks like and how to fight one. You do not hire a former DOJ attorney when you believe the worst that can happen is a state-level charge. You hire a former DOJ attorney when you understand that the people coming for you are federal. When you understand that the Coast Guard Investigative Service, not a state police force, not a county sheriff, is the agency building the case against you. Brian Hooker hired that lawyer this week, the same week CGS confirmed the suspected murder classification. The same week the Margaret Norvel sailed for the Bahamas. The same week dive teams entered the water at GPS-identified locations. He knows what is coming. Karli Aylesworth is 29 years old. She has been without her mother for 7 weeks. She has walked the shorelines of the Bahamas searching for her. She has given DNA to federal investigators. She has spoken publicly when speaking was the hardest thing she could do. And she has watched the man who raised her from age 3 say nothing to her since the early days of this investigation. When Ashley Banfield showed her the images of the Coast Guard arriving, the 154-foot cutter, the dive teams, Maggie back on the beaches, the ROV going underwater, Karli said something simple and direct. She said she had a feeling that something was going to happen this time. She said she has a gut feeling about where her mother is, in the water, with the scuba weights that are missing from the Soulmate.
I just have a feeling that she's in the water somewhere with those scuba weights that are missing, but that's just my feeling. So I don't know if she can be on land because I know it's all like limestone and that stuff is really hard to break through. So I feel like she might be in the water.
Karli Aylesworth visited the Bahamas in February 2026, just 2 months before her mother disappeared. She and Brian and Lynette went paddleboarding. They explored the mangroves off the marina. They went to secluded beaches. They went to a spot called Snapper Point. Brian Hooker knows those waters. He knew them before April 4th. He had explored them with Lynette. He had paddled through the mangroves. He had found the secluded spots. Karli said something about what happens to people who kill women in prison. She said she knows because she worked in one. She is not asking for sympathy. She is asking for her mother to be found.
I hope he gets put in prison for the rest of his life, and I don't know. I know prisoners don't really like people who beat women because I worked in a prison before, so good luck.
And she is waiting for the men and women who arrived in the Bahamas today to do what 7 weeks of searching based on Brian Hooker's lies could not. The Coast Guard completed their 4-day search operation in the Abacos. Dive teams entered the water at GPS-identified locations. The ROV searched the abandoned harbor near Witch Point. K9 Maggie worked the northwest shorelines of Lubbers Quarters, areas that were never searched before because the original search was based on Brian's story, not his GPS data. An article of clothing matching Lynette's aqua cover-up was found and handed over to investigators with precise coordinates. Investigators have secured what sources are describing as devastating evidence from those search locations. However, Lynette's remains were not found. The search is over for now, but the investigation is not. The case is not closed. Brian Hooker has not been charged with any crime. He denies all wrongdoing and is presumed innocent until proven guilty in a court of law. But devastating evidence has been secured. DNA from Lynette's mother, daughter, and father has already been collected and is ready for immediate identification the moment remains are found. The federal case being built by CGS has been 7 weeks in the making. GPS data, digital forensics, watch logs, Starlink records, witness accounts, missing equipment, all of it methodically gathered by an agency with a conviction rate above 95%. The search for Lynette continues. Lynette Hooker was 55 years old. She was from Michigan. She sold everything she owned to live at sea. She called the ocean her happy place. She documented 10 years of sunsets and sea turtles and early mornings on the water on a page called The Sailing Hookers. She bought a plane ticket for March 11th. She was going to leave. 2 weeks later, she was gone. Her daughter is waiting. Her mother is waiting. The people who loved her have been waiting for 7 weeks. At the final record, we will cover every development as it happens. When Lynette is found, we will be here. When charges are filed, we will be here. When Brian Hooker faces a jury, we will be here. Subscribe to the final record right now and turn on notifications, because this case is moving faster than it ever has. Lynette Hooker deserves the truth. If you have any information, please submit an anonymous tip through the CGS Tips app on the Apple App Store or Google Play.